Okay, we're back at the Greenlight Cafe, which is the home of Samui Real, which is the critical thinkers forum on the island. My name is Dennis from Awakening in Health, and we started the first part of the chat with Dr. Eamon McKinney and Frans Vandenbosch. My apologies, Frans. And we've just decided we've relocated here, and they're going to continue the conversation. And to kind of catch people up, both of these gentlemen are absolute experts in China. They both live there. They've had extensive business dealings in China. They both speak fluent dialects of Chinese, including Mandarin. And we're going to try and we're going to freestyle it and kind of have a casual conversation. But I'm being a bit selfish here because it's something that confuses me. Is this perpetual dialogue from the West of China bad guy, China repressed, everybody's slaves, you say the wrong thing, you can get shut up in a gulag for 1,000 years, and the stories that Frans did a cracking presentation yesterday, and it seems that that's absolutely one of the furthest things from the truth. And people, if they've looked at my content, know where I stand with the mainstream media. I distrust all of it. I think it's a big propaganda machine, which is ironic because that's the thing that's leveled at China, being a propaganda machine. I think the West is just as heavily, if not more so, propagandized. So yeah, I'm going to throw it open to either of the two gentlemen first about where they want to take the conversation from there. Frans.
Why are people thinking like that about China? And what can we do to change that? I did a survey some 4 months ago, and I made 4 suppositions. What would help people to think more positively about China? What are the causes why they are thinking so negative about China? And I was thinking the media, the Western mainstream media is probably a cause. 2, would it help if people speak fluently Mandarin Chinese? When they are able to follow the Chinese media, social media also, to get a better understanding of China. 3, does it help when your partner is Chinese? When he or she is born in China, marry him or her, are you thinking then more positively about China or not? And 4, and finally, does it help when you visit China as a tourist for a week or 2? Does it help when you have lived in China for a certain time, months, years in China? What of these 4 things is contributing most to know the real China? I have not yet all the answers in. I have, I think, 82 or so answers, and what I got from the preliminary results is it's the media first, and the media. It actually doesn't help too much when you speak Chinese, when you lived in China, when your partner is Chinese. It helps a bit, yes. People who go to China as a tourist to see China, or even have lived and worked in China, when they return home to the West, after a while the media is working on them. Every day they are showered with the negative China, and they are turning again. It doesn't help if your partner is Chinese. Many of these Chinese women marrying a Westerner, they want to go to the West. That's their purpose, and they forget their culture, their family, and so on. China is a closed chapter for them.
So it's almost like they're indoctrinated along the same lines just by virtue of having exposure to this thing that you're trying to put your finger on, and you've identified this as specifically the media.
The media. The other three things, it helps a bit and temporarily for a couple of weeks or maybe a year or so. But I've seen so many friends, people who lived with me in China, they returned and they are completely, it is whether you're independent from the Western media, that's the key factor or of your way of thinking about China. That's the preliminary conclusion. I'm waiting for much more people. I need at least 1,000 people to answer. If you want to answer my survey, please go to my website.
So you've got a survey and you want people to complete that. What's the website again?
That's yellowlion.org.
Lion as in Lion.
Yes.
.org. And people who watch this, anybody who watches this, complete the survey to give us more context as to your thesis.
Yes.
Would that be right?
Yes.
Okay.
It are 28 questions. You can complete that in 10 to 12 minutes. Oh, one other thing. I found out that so many people are trying to cheat in surveys. Yes.
They're trying to cheat the survey.
Yes, that's right. Yes, but
So when you say people trying to cheat, are you talking about nefarious characters trying to influence the survey?
Yes.
Okay. Wow. So I want to talk to like Eamon's a mate of mine, so I call him Eamon. But for contextual purposes, I'm going to do something which he dislikes, which is refer to him as Dr. McKinney, because it adds credibility to the fact that he's got a very significant and valuable opinion on what we're talking about. So to go from where Frans left off, there obviously is. It sounds like, and I'm paraphrasing as well, so correct me if I'm wrong in any way. There seems to be an attack on what the West considers China, or what the power brokers in the West want the average person to consider as China. Two-part question here. The first one is why, and is it, for example, is it because it's a threat? Is it because it keeps humanity enslaved? And what part of the overall agenda does it serve to have this going on?
People's perception in the West of China is overwhelmingly negative, and it's become much worse since Trump came in and started blaming COVID. But it's always been there. There's always been this negativity. If you live in the West, there's every chance that you have never read, seen or heard anything from the government or the mainstream media about China that hasn't been in some way negative. And it's all illusions. So you'll hear them talking about human rights. But there's no examples. There's nothing they can point to.
What about the Uyghurs and the organ harvesting and there's a load of stuff in the media. Are the destruction of religions and picking up these societies?
Okay, let me address that.
So I want to be devil's advocate deliberately because people have these thoughts.
Okay, well, since that subject has arisen, then I'll explain that. But there's this propaganda that's always portrayed in the West that somehow China persecutes its minorities. China has 55 different ethnic groups with distinct languages, and it encourages all of them to pursue those and encourages them to maintain their local culture. That's a fact. It's usually talking about the Muslim population there. Muslims are all over China. They have privileges that the Han Chinese don't have. They were restricted to the one-child policy.
The Han Chinese being?
The native indigenous Chinese. The Muslims primarily come from the northwest of China, so they're actually sort of half Turkic, half Chinese. And they're all over China. They have their mosques. They don't have to send their kids to Chinese school. They have all kinds of privileges. When you're talking about the Uyghurs, which is in Xinjiang province, which is the very northwest, very remote part, that Well, China borders 14 countries, and now it's made up where India, it gets on fine with all of them. 8 of those countries are Islamic. Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, all the stands. They all have exactly the same problem there, which is Islamic fundamental and terrorism. There's a terrorist group that are aligned with ISIS, means they're funded by the West, to go around and stir up shit, everywhere. And all of those countries have got exactly the same problem, including China. Do they have concentration camps? Well, nobody's ever provided any proof.
Is it any different to Guantanamo Bay? So yeah.
No, if you want concrete proof of human rights, there you go. Abu Ghraib, Guantanamo Bay, black torture sites. But nobody has been able to actually back up anything about human rights violations in China. That's a fact.
What about all those contentious videos of the lines and lines of people with the friggin' scars getting organs removed and no, seriously, explain that. Like, it's easy. Why should I dismiss that?
Well, because you're a critical thinker, Dennis, and if you put it in the context of the overall ongoing, calumnies that are consistently thrown at Chinese. If you ask a Chinese person, about are Muslims persecuted, they go, what are you talking about?
Okay. What do you have to say on that, Frans?
Some of these videos are made in Indonesia or in Malaysia or so, or they are just schools instead of concentration camps. It's all fake. It is Adrian Zenz who started all this.
Who was that?
Adrian Zenz.
Okay.
He was subsidized, paid by the BBC and by MI5. That started the whole Xinjiang thing about prosecution of Muslims in Xinjiang.
So you're saying that the whole Uyghur situation is mostly, or is there any part of that that's true?
Can I make a point?
Yeah, sure.
Again,
yeah.
With most things in China, excuse me, Frans, you have to put this in context. In 1950, when the communists won the civil war and the Kuomintang, the nationalist America-backed, fled to Taiwan. The West lost everything it had in China. All right, all its holdings, all the fortunes, the opium war, that was all gone. They've never forgiven the Chinese for that. The Korean War, and to an extent the Vietnam War, was about China. Fact.
Yeah.
Okay. They tried to launch, with American troops and the Kuomintang troops, re-invasion of China. It never took hold. There was a Kuomintang faction in Yunnan province, Kunming, which was another part of the Kuomintang army that was isolated. And they were backed by the West to move in to Laos, start the opium business, create the Iron Triangle, with the purpose of re-invading China again. So they've always had the hump with China because of that. And there's been nothing but attempts to destabilise China, over Xinjiang, over Tibet, over Taiwan. And people talk about Chinese aggression, about Taiwan. What we've seen is 75 years of unbelievable restraint against relentless provocations over Taiwan. Relentless. So again, none of these vague claims that they make about Chinese aggression and human rights have any substance whatsoever.
Okay. So back to Frans. And thanks for bringing this up, Eamon, because this is something that I'm very curious about. But the persecution of the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan people. No, seriously, open this up, because this is
the real one or the CIA one? Staying in 5-star resorts and living in style.
Yeah, listen, open that up again, because I mean that's a big anti-China trope, isn't it? That we hate the Chinese because of the poor Dalai Lama. What's going on with that?
Yeah, right. The poor Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama is actually a CIA agent. He's paid every month. He's paid by the CIA. CIA, later NED, but he's serving the interests of the United States. He's in no way serving the Tibetan people. By the way, how did Tibet came to China? It were the Mongols, Mongolia. They conquered the whole of Asia, including Tibet and China. Whole populations were killed all over Asia, including the Middle East, the Western Asia area. So they conquered Tibet and China. Their descendants of these people became the Emperor of China, and they ruled China, including Tibet and many other areas. That's the way Tibet became part of China in 1320 or something like that, or 1340, many decades ago. So
you say that there's a more kind of historical aspect to the whole Tibet versus China story that goes back to the Mongols, as opposed to this trope that we're hearing now of China bad, took over Tibet, destroying Tibet. Is that paraphrasing? Kind of?
China never took over or conquered Tibet. It was the grandson.
Tibet was a brutal feudal theocracy. All right, the people were essentially enslaved under this guise of like Buddhism, but it was the most corrupt, horrible regime. They asked the Chinese to come in. This is a fact. At the time, life expectancy in Tibet in the 50s was 40, and adult illiteracy was 100%.
What time frame are we talking about, Eamon?
50s.
Yeah.
Okay, today the life expectancy in Tibet is like nearly 90, and adult literacy is 100%. And if you go and you ask the Tibetan people who remember what it was like, they're better off. This is again another piece of bullshit. And the Dalai Lama is just a PR tool. But, you know.
Do you remember him trying to put his tongue in that young kid's mouth a year or 2 years ago? Did you see that video? He's on camera. Yeah. Saying "kiss me and with your tongue" or something like that. It's just one of the most amazing things.
The CIA are going, "Why did he get home?" The key thing about this is, and Frans and I can talk all day long. You know, people in the West, you're just this anti-China propaganda. It's just this ambient propaganda. It's always there.
So why?
Well, firstly, it's hard to disprove because, you know, they'll come out and they'll talk about something in isolation in China, which may or may not have happened once, who knows. But it doesn't make any sense unless you provide a whole load of context. And people don't have the patience to listen to it and apply any kind of critical reasoning. And even people who think that they're switched on and awake and they don't believe the media and they don't believe that, they still have this anti-China bias. It's the same with Russia. If you live in the West, you've never heard anything about Russia that hasn't been negative. And that goes back 200 years to the Congress of Vienna, when the Tsar of Russia, called out the Rothschilds and said, "You're never getting anywhere near Russia." And their goal for the last 200 years has been the destruction of Russia. They assassinated 5 Tsars, they put 2 world wars on them, the Bolshevik Revolution, and here they are now. They're still standing. Okay? This has always been about the money power. They've never been able to get any traction in Russia. And Putin in 2007, he threw the Rothschilds bank out, got rid of all the international debt. And look at Russia today. You know the photos you were showing last night in your talk about the affluence in China? Those photographs, you could take those in Moscow. Same thing. You know, they see the stores and the supermarket and everything works, everything's clean, everything's friendly and happy. You know?
So I'm going to go back to Frans, but great context. Why the attack on China, Frans?
Why the attack?
Do you think?
I think maybe it's envy or they cannot stand it that China is now more developed than the United States, that the prosperity of the people is much better, life expectancy is better in China, and so much other things. Maybe they cannot stand it, or they hope to get some profit from that. I don't know. It has always been that Tiananmen, which is actually color revolution. Exactly.
What is it?
Tiananmen was square. Is a color revolution organized by the.
Revolution?
What's a color revolution?
Soros-backed colour revolution, like they had in Ukraine with Maidan and so many others. All right, it didn't work. All right, but the PR value for the West was just immense. But look, if you talk about the why, part of it is because they got deprived of their profits in 1950, and the money power has no sense of humour about that sort of thing. But more specifically, China's banking system, they have public banking. They don't have a money creation system that's in private hands. They don't have a system of usury. If you look at the money power in the West, all of these wars were about preserving and their monopoly over money creation, okay, and their opposition to public banking. Anytime anybody's tried to do that, okay, Napoleon, Hitler, the Japanese, the Tsars, they launch war. China has public banking. Banking in China is regarded as a public utility. It is there to serve the economy and the people. Not the other way round, the way it is in the West, where the people are just fodder to produce, for the banking sector. It's the other way round. It's the fact that they won't turn into what they call a liberal democracy, which means a corporatocracy, where they privatise all the key industries.
Is there an element there and we can use, let's say, Gaddafi as a reference point, and there's a few other so-called despots, and basically they established their own private banks. Mm-hmm. They refused the central bank system, and Libya is just such a tragedy because it was one of the most prosperous, one of the most beautiful cities before the Americans got a hold of it. Are we seeing a similar kind of setup with China that they did to Libya? Is that where this is going, do you think?
China's economic model in total is the biggest threat to them, because whereas the perception of China in the West is overall very negative, and we get the impression that that's the world view, and it isn't. If you look at the global south, Africa in particular, Frans and I were talking about this earlier, they have a very positive attitude towards China because they see their approach as being in complete opposition to the approach of the imperialists that they've suffered under for 200 years in Africa, under brutal circumstances, and they've always been suppressed. So the perception of China is negative in the West, the global minority, but that's not shared elsewhere, certainly not South America or most other parts of Asia, But again, people have to be able to confront the fact that this is this unconscious propaganda and this cognitive bias that they've been given, and they don't even really realise it.
So it's almost like the headline readers again, and I come across this with health specifically. COVID's another example. There's so many examples of the propaganda in the West. Would you like to elaborate on that, Frans?
I just 100% agree with that, and I sometimes wonder, when will they finally give up that? When will it end, this thing? They will continue with chasing China in all possible ways through Taiwan, Xinjiang, Tibet and all the other subjects. It will continue for some time, and I sometimes wonder, will they ever give up that? When will that imperialistic system finally collapse? When will they start to cooperate with China on a win-win basis? It will take some.
Okay, I got another kind of thing that is very contextual at the moment. So, and I'll give my biased opinion first, which is that I think Trump is part of the system. I think we saw he did nothing in 2017. He pushed the vaccines. People can look up this if they want. And I mentioned this to you yesterday, Frans, that more bombs were dropped in his first year. He's apparently the peace president than any other president. So this is during Trump's reign. I think he's part of the system to placate the Americans so they don't do anything. But bearing that in mind, or not as the case may be, what do you see if Trump does get into power, which is looking fairly likely? Do you see any breaking or any improvement in the relations between China or not? Or are we just looking about going in the same direction?
The United States is not ruled by the president. It doesn't matter who is in the White House. It doesn't matter at all. They have no power. The president has no power. The country is ruled by oligarchs, by a small club of ultra-rich people. And as long as that doesn't change, people can vote whatever they want. It doesn't make any difference whether it's Trump or whatever. It doesn't.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to Eamon, and based on that kind of question I posed about Trump, France implies that America, and I fully agree with this, by the way, is run by oligarchs. Why isn't China run by oligarchs? And I could take it even a step further, and we could go as far as the 13 families that apparently control the world. Why can't we assume that China are part of the system, and this is just a method of creating chaos and division, but it's the same oligarchs who are, I don't know, progressing humanity to chaos?
Well, that's a good question. Well, the first thing is you've got to understand that what the Chinese understand and study relentlessly is imperialism. How the century of shame that they suffered through, imperialism, they really wanted to understand it. The purpose of the Communist Party is to protect China from the reimposition of imperialism. And they understand fully how it works. That was their opposition to democracy that Sun Yat-sen saw in the early 1900s in America. It's like, they call it democracy, but there isn't one that hasn't turned into an oligarchy in 5 minutes. Okay, and they saw in America the super rich who they love showing off to the Chinese, and then the people who are living on the streets starving. So they weren't overly impressed with that system. They understand that oligarchy is the capitalist Trojan horse. So, for example, if you study America, they really didn't have any oligarchs up until what they called the Gilded Age, which was between essentially 1865, the end of the Civil War, and the start of the First World War. At that time, there's a wonderful book it's published in 1888 called The Great Red Dragon. So it was a contemporaneous account of the Rothschilds and the foundation of the money power. And the Rothschilds had essentially taken over most of the shares in the Bank of England. Their control was immense, but they looked at how they were funding the oligarchs in America to create these huge monopolies like the Rockefellers, the Harrimans, the Carnegies, whatever it took, alright, because they were already realising the British Empire was on its way out and the new centre of power was going to be America. So they created and funded this oligarchical class, and then that ends up where they create the Federal Reserve. They own a large portion of all the 6 Wall Street banks. They control most of the major corporations. If you look at BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street, the trillions that they have, that's the real old banking family money. That is society changing money. So they understand how oligarchs operate. So everything they do is to prevent that, because they understand what. Now Jack Ma, for example, who was the CEO of Alibaba, came out and criticised the the Chinese banking system, making pro-Western sounds, and he was told to take his money and go and fuck off somewhere and keep his mouth shut. Just like Putin did with the oligarchs there. You keep your money, you're paying taxes, but you don't interfere in the political system. They all did except one, Khodorkovsky, and he locked him up. Khodorkovsky was the front man for the Rothschilds during the Great Russia. Jack Ma, because you have factions in China, so Jack Ma and Alibaba, he's the front man. You think that they've got someone better looking.
So it's the Amazon essentially of China, Alibaba, right?
Yeah, but more than Amazon.
Yeah.
But that's owned by the Zhang family from Shanghai. They're an old established Shanghai family that survived through all the different regimes. They gave us Jiang Zemin, who was the premier in 2002. They've always been in opposition to the Beijing faction. Okay, and Xi Jinping's family, they're part of the Wanda group. And the Wanda group, they're involved in like shopping malls, they own the film studios, hotels, all that sort of thing. So you have factions, but that's why they will never privatise their key sectors. Okay, they're not going to turn them over. They're not going to open up their capital bond markets and become slaves to international debt.
So can I ask you a quick question?
It's about resisting imperialism, and that starts with preventing the rise of an oligarchical class. Get as rich as you want, like my good friend Mr. Mong from Huawei. You know what I mean? Do it the right way. He employs hundreds of thousands of people. I visited his factory, I think in 2004. It was down in Guangdong somewhere. What a fucking delightful guy. You know what I mean? And he'd started it sleeping on the floor in the garage with his family, putting together modems. The man is like mega rich. They've got this new satellite phone now. He's producing a better product, and he did it the right way. He employed people.
So it's there's a few points. So first of all, I'd like you to clarify who they are, and is there a difference between the rulers? And it sounds like you're also saying that the rulers have more of an intention to support the community than, let's say, the Western part of things. And the other thing I'm almost kind of seeing as a subtext is the fallacy of democracy in Western society, whereas you almost have this economic system in China that sounds very democratic, as opposed to this kind of communist ideal where everybody's money gets taken and it goes to the.
Look, no. Firstly, you're doing two different things here. The economics is slightly different. What was the first part of that?
The first part was who are the they? You've referred to they a few times.
Look, people talk about corporations rule the world. Yeah, and the corporations are owned by the central bankers. Okay, the City of London, the city-state that's not accountable to anyone. Okay, that has ruled international finance, controls most of the corporations, has tried to monopolise all the world's resources. Okay, them. Okay, it's the old family banking cartels centred with impunity in the City of London. They control just about anything.
And when you talk about
any piece of human tragedy going on in the world, you can trace it back to these motherfuckers.
I agree. I'm on about the they when you refer to China.
They, well, the government.
Okay.
The government has a mandate, there's a mission statement. They're dedicated public servants. Alright, it's a meritocracy. It's not an autocracy. Xi Jinping doesn't have complete control, alright? Everything's by consensus. They sit around, they discuss things with intelligent people, they consider long-term consequences, they accept what they don't know, alright? And then they'll come up with a policy, and then everybody's on board, regardless of what the opinions were. Once they agree on something, that's it. And you know what? They mean it and they do it.
I have to agree, and I want to add the sense of community of the corporations, even the Chinese corporations. We have difficulties to imagine how responsible these Chinese companies, sometimes very big companies, how responsible they feel them for their community and for their workers. they feel responsible for them, to care for them, really care for them. Right, exactly. And when you have a problem at home, in your family, your father or mother is sick, just stay home. Don't worry about your work. That even if it is disrupting the production in the factory.
Can I just cut in there for a sec? So most people, including me sometimes, with all the propaganda going on, have this idea of these poor people lined up by the hundreds of thousands, getting up at 5 a.m., working 18 hours a day, and sleeping on a factory floor and then doing it all again in front of a sewing machine. I know I'm being a bit hyperbolic there, but what would you say to that?
Workers in the West would die for the workers' rights that the Chinese have.
And how do you know that?
Well, because I know what the workers' rights are in China. I mean, like if you...
Because you've had businesses and you've employed people there specifically, yeah.
If I'm paying someone $2,000 a month, if that's their salary, that's exactly what they get. I have to pay about half of that again, which is for their 5 insurances: pension, schooling, healthcare, a couple of others, savings account. And the employer pays that, and they've got very strict labour laws that they don't have in the Western world.
So the pictures we see of the friggin' hundreds and hundreds of rows of, let's say again to use that analogy, of all the women in front of the sewing machines pumping out, I don't know, Adidas trailers.
Is over.
So that was a thing, but now that
these assembly lines, long
yes,
assembly
yeah,
lines,
okay.
all the women along the assembly lines, that time is over. That is done now. It's a picture from the past.
So paint a picture, and I'm going to get back to you, Eamon, as well in a second, of there's so many in Australia, in England, in Ireland. We've got this kind of I don't know, 1980s type of picture of the cohesive, happy family. Dad comes home, the mortgage is paid off, they've got plenty of disposable income, all this kind of stuff, against the contrast of the Chinese, who are really poor, enslaved and whatnot. And we know, obviously now, many people listening to this are going to be thinking about, being suicidal on antidepressants, unable to pay their mortgages, their children are being indoctrinated with transsexuality, whatever the hell it is. It is a dystopia in so many places in America, in Australia, in Western countries. How does that compare to, and I know it's a bit hard to say, but let's say a typical mother, father, family in China, maybe 2 kids, 2.5 kids, whatever it is. Are we... It's almost like an inverse of things that are going on. So can you describe that typical family in China, what it's like? Is dad working all hours at a day, never seen his kids? Are the kids dysfunctional? Are they enslaved by society?
I can provide the example from the factory I managed in Wuxi. At 5 o'clock there were 720 people working there. At 5 o'clock everybody went on the bus to either the subway station or the high-speed train station, and they went home at 5 o'clock. Everybody
On the dot.
Including the management, everybody. The lights were switched off, machines were closed, everybody home.
Well, it almost sounds like their lives are different. It almost sounds like, from listening to you guys chatting, that this idealistic lifestyle that is portrayed as happening in the West, which we know it's not. It almost sounds like the Chinese have that, and it almost sounds like the inverse with the indoctrination and the you look at Melbourne getting locked down the way it was. You look at all the border stuff happening in Ireland, in Switzerland, in France, in America. What are your thoughts on that?
What can I say to that? Yes, it's the inverse. Yes, that's right. I know that when I was working in Germany, in Stuttgart, that I was working a lot of overtime, but in China it was part of the culture to go home at 5.
I mean, I try and add up all the time I spend living in China and everything, and it comes to a long time. But I never lived there because I thought it was the best place to live. I was always there for some sort of purpose. You know, I don't live there because I particularly like the lifestyle. Everybody lives in apartments, nobody's got a house with a little garden. You know, you got to fight to go and find some nature. You know, I'm not trying to paint it in any way as some sort of utopia, but it's hellaciously interesting, can be hilarious. If you learn how to interact with the Chinese, you'll make some wonderful friends there. But in terms of the lifestyles, like, to me it's like living in New York or somewhere, you know. So I'm not trying to paint it as some sort of utopia, but I will say this, that when we spoke earlier about perceptions about China in the West and, you know, how negativity's increased over the past few years, you seem to have two groups of people. There's those people that now hate China, and then there's those people that have actually been there. And very few people, and I've taken all kinds of trade missions from America over there with 50, 60 people, and somebody bring their wives. They all go back with a completely different impression than what they arrived with, you know? You know, we have a tendency in the West, and so everybody looks at China, and, you know, even if you're not buying all the negativity, you're getting a very Western-centric view of a culture that they don't understand. They don't understand China's mindset and what essentially drives them. What is their sense of recovered national pride after a century of humiliation? So if you want to understand them, the century of humiliation, never again. That's what drives their government policy. That's what keeps the oligarchs out. That's what keeps that party functioning, because it delivers.
Is your thoughts, yeah?
I simply agree. Too few people realize that China has completely different viewpoints, especially the Americans. When I was living in Shanghai, we had a club of Flemings meeting each other every month. We had our drinking.
That's Flemish people from the north of Belgium, is that right?
Right.
Yep.
Yes.
Just to, you know.
Most of them are entrepreneurs who established a factory there or a company in China, or management people or engineers like that. And there I could see a clear division between those people, managers, who could speak some Chinese, and those who could not speak Chinese, living in an expat compound, living in their own bubble, not really in China, but went to their own shops, supermarkets and so on, everything in English of course. And the people who could speak Chinese, and in their weekly management meeting, where middle management is speaking English of course, but the middle management is mostly Chinese, broadcast manager, production managers, quality manager, Chinese, but in these management meetings they were speaking Chinese. Those people who were unable to speak Chinese, they didn't really knew what was going on in the factory. These other people speaking Chinese, they could go around speaking to the workers in the factory, and these middle management people, the Chinese, they could say whatever they want in the management meeting. These people knew what was really going on. These people were much more happy in China, staying in China often much longer, while the others, they were leaving after 1 or 2 years. They feel unhappy in China, and so fine, China is boycotting my business, not going flourishing well, and so complaining all the time. And the others knew what was really on. They adapted to the China. They accepted that the business culture in China is different from the West. I met a lot of Chinese American entrepreneurs in Shanghai and around. These people were all the time complaining all the time that China is boycotting my factory, my business is not going well. My advice to them was behave like a German. The German factories, they are flourishing, they are doing extremely good business in China. There are whole cities, Kunshan for example, which are almost German cities. They are flourishing. So my advice to them, recommendations to the American entrepreneurs in Shanghai was behave like a German, be more humble, accept the Chinese different business culture. But it seems to be impossible for these people. They are so indoctrinated they wanted to introduce the American way of life in China, which is entirely impossible, of course. That's no way you will change China.
So, Frans, what are you trying to do then? Because I'm conscious that you got a flight to catch pretty soon, so we'll move towards wrapping it up. I'm kind of asking a rhetorical question because I asked you this already, but I want you to explain this. You're obviously, you've said to me that you're not painting China as a utopia. You're not trying to give their side of the story. So what are you up to? And tell us a bit about your work involved in that in the book. But what's your motive in, I guess, having a contrary narrative to what we hear in the mainstream media? If you could sum it up.
Okay. My purpose of giving lectures and writing about China and so on is not to defend China. In no way I'm defending China. I'm not trying to push through the Chinese system. That's not my purpose. The reason why I'm doing this is I want to bring out the truth. It is, I feel it's terrible. It's disgusting how the media are painting China, and that is why I am doing that. I want to bring out the truth. I want to show to the people in the West the real China. That's why I am doing all this.
You're almost, hang on, we'll get back to you in a second. So you're fairly anonymous, not for your own purposes, but because of the way the system is created on social media. You were telling me you shadow banned, get kicked off LinkedIn. So how can people have some kind of contact with you or look at your work? What would you suggest?
They can buy my book, of course.
Yep.
They can go to my website, read some articles, comment on it.
How do they do that? Your website, if you can.
Website is yellowlion.org.
Yep.
Go there, read some articles. They can comment on. They can contact me.
How do they contact you?
Sorry.
How do they contact you?
Through my website. On
Perfect.
the website, they can contact me. My email is there, and they can, in all kinds of ways, contact me. No problem.
And people can reach out to my channel as well. And are you happy if I get any inquiries or comments to pass that on?
Yes, please.
Great.
Please. Yes. I also have a newsletter, which I write now from my past 4 weeks in China, in Laos and in Thailand. I write on average every 4 or 5 days. I write a newsletter out with lots of photos, maybe 20, 30 photos, which I have taken. I've taken 2,000 more photos from every specialities about China, things that I mostly geopolitical things which are different, that we say, oh, surprise. That's which I appreciate on China. You never get bored. You see special things, unbelievable things every 5 minutes. When you walk over the street, you are surprised every moment. You see things that, wow. And I make a photo of that, write some comments, and that's in my newsletters, so they can subscribe to my newsletters to see all these specialities, these curious things about China.
Excellent. And I really enjoyed your presentation last night. And also I'm going to do a couple of mentions which are very important to Pat Kell, who reached out to you, who is the kind of, I guess, the fulcrum of the Green Light Cafe here. I was hoping to get him into the video, but he had an appointment. So thank you very much, Pat, if you're watching this, or to whoever else, and also to people who recommended you. Was it Matt and Cynthia and Alex Craner? Yeah, your buddies them. So again, a big thank you to those guys. And thank you so much, Frans. But now, and we're going to just wrap it up with Dr. McKinney, with Eamon, about his kind of overview as well. But yeah, great job yesterday, and we love having you here, and we hope you come back.
You, Green Light Cafe and all those things. I was happy to give this presentation. First time in English I did that. I did that dozens of time in Dutch, but now first time in English, and I'm happy that you all appreciate it.
We love this. We love this. Thank you so much, Frans. And we'll finish off with Dr. McKinney. Eamon, to kind of wrap it up again, what's your motive? Are you kind of pro-Chinese, against the West? You know, what's kind of going on?
Look, people can make of China what they like, and they can like it or not like it. It's up to them. You can explain it to them and they can take it for what it is. The danger here is, why are we getting all this from the West? Why are they continually demonising China? Because they want to make China the cause of all their ills. China is our enemy. They've been talking for years about going to war with China for no reason that anybody can find, apart from the fact that they got private banking. Come on. The danger is that people think that China is the enemy. If you're in America, yeah, China's an easy fall guy.
The enemy is within America, isn't it? The enemy of America is within.
Know your enemy. It isn't China. Okay, that's the point I'm trying to make here. That's all I'm trying to make. You know, you can like the Chinese, not like them. I don't care, but they're not your enemy. Okay, the enemy that you seek, that is responsible for your problems, is much closer to home, and it's the same with Russia. Okay, Russia is not the enemy of the West. It wanted to be part of the West. It wanted to be part of the European community, but they always need enemies. They don't need friends, but they always need enemies. All right. Well, they got a bunch of them now. Well done. You know what I mean?
Eamon, again, I guess on behalf of Pat, and you're a longer member than me with Samuri Real and Green Light Cafe, but I certainly appreciate your input and your constant support to kind of, I guess, challenging mainstream narratives and some of the untruths we see. So with that, yeah, thank you very much.
I honestly believe, if you ask the majority of people today, do you believe what you're being told? Do you believe the government? Do you believe the mainstream media? Anybody with a room temperature IQ is going to say no. Okay, so people are surrounded by so many lies and half-truths, they don't know what to make. It's a confusing world. Okay, but start at home. That's where your problems are. All right, leave the Chinese alone. They're wonderful people.
Great place to finish it up, Eamon. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dennis. And my pleasure to be here with Frans, the legend, and meet him in person at long last. Thank you, Frans.
I agree. So again, just to, I guess, to summarise, we got two very experienced gentlemen who've both lived in China, can speak Chinese, have worked extensively with Chinese people, and it's really hard for me to sit back, even playing devil's advocate, and try to, I guess, promote a position that I hear through the mainstream media narrative that calls China the bad guy, the West is the good guy. You know, and again, Eamon alluded to this, and I think very accurately, that there's a big difference between reading the headlines and reading the subheading, as opposed to doing a really deep dive into the books and into the chapters and actually mingling with Chinese people in general. Whether people have contentious views about what the boys are talking about today, I really don't care. This is about truth. This is about sharing the other sides of narratives and the other sides of opinions. And again, I invite people to reach out to question myself, to question Frans, to question Eamon. We're more than happy to talk to people. And with that, we'll wrap it up. And I thank everybody who's going to watch this. Thank you very much.